Good morning. It's August 3rd, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. I'm Cory Morgan. I see Jet's already in the comments scroll over there, and I noticed he mentioned at the end of the day yesterday, we've got that new sponsor, Resistance Coffee. They are fantastic, but I directed people saying there was a coupon code for Triggered, and I believe they set one up now, but it wasn't actually set up yesterday, and you'd have to go to resistancecoffee.com/triggered in order to get that discount. So I don't want anybody to miss out on that discount. It's very important. And I'll talk more about that when I talk about the sponsor later. But since I saw Jet there, I thought I will correct that as soon as I start here. And good to see you all checking in. Gary, Dash, Len, Brenda, Nikki, all sorts of folks. And Alan in the West Indies. People all over. I love seeing that. Use the comment scroll, guys. We're live. That's part of what's fun about it. Get those feedback, those ideas, questions, discussion even going on. I've seen some pretty neat discussions going on in the comment scroll. I keep turning my head to the side. Somebody commented on that yesterday because I'm reading it. I won't necessarily, bring up every comment or pass it along to guests, but I do see them all. And yes, it's good to see it. It's there just to try to keep it civil, though. We can get worked up. We can get on each other's case a little, but we don't want to be outright fighting if we can avoid it. Take it to Facebook for that or something, or Twitter. It's one of the fun places to battle. All right. So, yes, that's that reminder. We are the daily Western Standard live broadcast, news, opinions, ranting, guests. We got it all. I'm going to start things out as usual with the daily observances. So not everybody knows about this, but August 3rd is Airplane Crop Duster Day. So this is the day you celebrate that height of technology. Actually, if you ever see those guys, if you're driving in the country and you see them coming down in those planes, spraying those crops, it's almost... You could spend an hour watching these pilots. I mean, they come so close to the power line, so close to the ground, and still manage to spray those. And of course, the advantage is you're not going to trample down any crop or anything like that when you're taking care of the pests and bugs to help keep us all fed. Of course, we're trying to ban all of the fertilizers and pesticides, and it'll lead to other things. I'm going to talk to one of our guests about that a little later, actually, that sort of thing. Another term for crop dusting also for those in the service industry or other areas. I owned a bar, as we said, customers would often annoy the hell out of me. And as an owner, you can only say so much. But the term for crop dusting would be to walk by a person or group and sort of just let fly and pass wind on your way by and get sort of a passive-aggressive revenge on them for their misbehavior as clientele. Or you could do it in the office as well, but I don't like letting those workplace secrets out when they're wondering when it wafted by them. All right, it's also Grab Some Nuts Day. This one you can interpret a lot of ways. We're going to stick to, just as you can see, with some regular nuts. If you like nuts, peanuts, walnuts, as you can see there, pecans, whatever. Today's the grab them. Make sure this is the day you get out and grab your nuts. Grab your nuts with your family. Grab your nuts with your friends. Grab your nuts on the street. This is the day. It's a National Grab Your Nuts Day. Or grab some nuts, I should say. See, sorry, I misread the title. But, you wouldn't want to be the only person around who missed out and didn't grab nuts when you had the chance. All right, guests, let's get on to more serious stuff. I got Kelly Malmberg coming on. He's been on before. He's an agricultural producer south of Calgary here in Alberta. I just want to continue those discussions on what's going on. We got a lot of high cost of living. We got a lot of pressure on our farmers. We got a lot of policies that are really pressuring them. I want to talk and expand a bit more on what's going on, especially when we're talking about reducing fertilizers is federal government's talking about. This caused a lot of problems around the world, and it's not going to help us these days. So, as I think Christopher Oldcorn, he's been on a number of times. Of course, he's the Western Standard reporter in Saskatchewan, and he writes some columns. We'll talk about some of the stories that Christopher's written recently, and a column he's going to be doing on universal basic income. We'll have some discussion of that before it comes up. Now, with what's got me going today, and I talked a bit about this the other day when I saw that tweet from the World Economic Forum, but I want to expand on it further. I think it's worthy of a whole rant here. And, with the advent of the personal affordable automobile, it was one of the greatest developments for individual freedoms in modern history. It's little wonder that the World Economic Forum and other authoritarians want to bring personal auto use to an end. Now, going back, Henry Ford might not have been a friend of labor unions, but when he released the Model T, he empowered individuals and workers more in a year than unions had managed to do in decades. Ford gave citizens the gift of unfettered, affordable transportation free of any state controls. It can't be understated how important this development was. Families with personal automobiles now had the mobility range to comparison shop for everything, from jobs to consumer products to healthcare. I mean, prior to the ability to own individual cars, citizens were dependent upon public transit, such as trains or streetcars, if they were locally available, or horse and buggy. Only the rich could afford the novelty of a personal vehicle. That all changed. People were essentially captives of their local jurisdictions before the Model T came out. Many company towns had just a single employer, owned everything from the local grocery store to housing. Once a family owned a car, they had the ability to travel elsewhere. Local business owners and politicians were forced to recognize the reality that people could vote with their feet, or their wheels in this case, and leave if they weren't being treated right. New and creative enterprises came about. The most early form of Amazon is the traveling salesman could travel town to town and sell innovative new consumer products. This spawned more competition and helped the cost of goods come down for people in general. Families, of course, could then take road trips and vacations that the prior generation never could have dreamed of. Motels and tourist attractions developed and spread across North America to serve the demand. Most importantly of all, it was totally uncontrolled. People could get in the car and drive wherever they pleased. They were only limited by their own fuel budget and time. Our modern authoritarians recognize that citizens with free mobility are difficult to control. And they're using climate change, of course, as their reason to crack down on that free movement. The WEF has been putting out articles critical of car ownership for years. Adherents to the WEF ideology have been helping their agenda along at every level of government. Municipalities are removing parking and using traffic calming measures in order to make driving less convenient. Zoning is being used to discourage new developments that allow parking, and bike lanes are being created on top of busy roadways, whether there's a realistic demand for bike lanes or not. Federal and provincial governments are taxing fuel and large vehicles to drive the cost up. They're also bullying auto manufacturers into giving up on building combustion vehicles and making them retool for electrical vehicles. Subsidies are a part of this as well, since the electric vehicles aren't commercially viable. Despite all the efforts to push people into electric vehicles for over a decade, people haven't embraced them. They remain an expensive novelty item for urban commuters and virtue signalers. The infrastructure for generating enough power for an all-electric national fleet of vehicles doesn't exist, and new power generation projects aren't even being built to service them. We're not going to transition, guys. What is going to happen is we're going to see a shortage of combustion engine vehicles as manufacturing has been disrupted by government intervention. The cost of gas-powered cars is going to go through the roof, while electric vehicles will still remain impractical and expensive. This is when the government will swoop in to the rescue. Nationalizing transportation, essentially. People will be relying on public transit, whether it's through local or long-distance bus rides and trains, and of course, federally regulated air travel. The freedom and individual ability to travel wherever one wants is going to be gone. Think of how this will work in a cashless society. What if the government wants to quell a future protest? It'd be easy to stop all public transit from reaching the protest sites, won't it? Individuals could have travel rights removed for a myriad of reasons, and they might be limited to staying within certain zones. How easy would it be for the state to control the transfer of goods to certain areas? Would they do so? Does this sound impossible? Well, look at what the state did during the pandemic in this last couple of years. We couldn't even sit down for a meal without being forced to wear a mask on the way to the table and providing proof of being medicated. So for them to tell us where we can go at times, yeah, that's not beyond belief at all. Our individual freedoms are being stripped one by one. Speech, expression, protest, press, and the sanctity of the body have all been eroded this last couple of years. Our right to unfettered mobility is being threatened too. The personal automobile is more than just a convenience. It's an integral part of our democratic society and our rights as individuals. As with so many initiatives by the state, the motivation isn't to protect the climate or public health. It's all about control. We need to stand up for the personal auto now while we still can, because it's a lot more important than a lot of people realize. Well, that's what's got me going today, guys. So keep an eye on that. They want your cars, and they're coming for them. All right, let's bring in Dave Naylor, our news editor, see what else is going on out there. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
It's going well, Cory. Even though I must say I was disappointed to hear that your queen bee is buzzed off.
Yes, my bloody hive swarmed last week. I did the beekeeper error of not watching closely enough and realizing they were getting ready to up and go. And my queen picked up with half of her bees, or half of my bees, and left to find greener pastures elsewhere. So now I'm sitting with half a hive, hoping they'll regenerate.
Can you put a lost and found ad on Kijiji? Looking for a swarm of bees?
Well, yeah, I was thinking of putting a thing out on Pritis, actually, with the buy and sell. They got a thing there. I just never got around to it, saying, if you see a swarm, let me know, because you can capture them and rehive them. But it was probably too late by the time I even realized they were gone.
Okay, now there's more queen eggs in there. Is that what I understand? That hopefully one of them will grow and stick around?
There's queen cells, and it's quite fascinating. So they'll hatch, and then they'll all fight each other. One queen will survive. She'll go out to try and find herself a lover for an afternoon and get impregnated. And if she survives and gets back to the hive, then in a couple of weeks, she'll start laying eggs, and we'll kind of be moving back to normal with half the normal bees. if she doesn't survive, well, I might have to buy new bees next year.
Oh, those damn bees, eh? Well, that's a shame. Hopefully they come back, or you find them, or one of those queen bees hatch, because looks like they were producing some pretty good stuff there.
We'll see. Yeah, yeah. You can see Jane there. Actually, that's a video you got off Facebook. That's good. And one of my frames broke. I couldn't get back into the hive right, and it was full of honey. So we thought, what the heck, with the cap stuff, Jane screened it all through some cheesecloth, and we got a great big jar of honey out of those guys. So if nothing else happens and I lose my bees, we'll have at least gotten one good jar of fresh local honey.
Yes, the most expensive jar going, I imagine.
Yeah, we'll need a few more to make up the costs, I think.
Yeah, well, on the website today, Cory, a few stories of interest. A couple of drivers in Ottawa appear to have lost their minds. One of them crashed into the Parliament Hill gates, causing all sorts of a security ruckus. And there was an amphibious bus sort of doing its morning practice that swerved and hit the Prime Minister's residence gate at 24 Sussex. So I guess it was attracted, being an amphibious bus, Cory, it must have been attracted to all the leaks coming out of there for CBC coverage. Other stuff we've got, the CTF says things are looking a little bit more rosy on the economic future, that the Liberals could balance the budget by 2041. The last estimate we got from the Parliamentary Budget Office was 2070. So they've knocked about 30 years off the thing, and hopefully they can continue to knock it more. As you know, Cory, the federal government has called an inquiry into the Emergencies Act, and that's only going to cost $19 million to try and get to the bottom of that, but it'll be money well spent. Florida Governor DeSantis, who appears to be one of the Republican frontrunners for the presidential race 2 years' time, is slamming doctors who get involved in gender transition and operations for kids. So that's an interesting story. Our friends at CBC, they're celebrating because they got $12 million in raises last year, and that's on top of $15 million in bonuses. So it's certainly nice work if you can get it down at CBC. I don't think you and I need apply. And our frightening story out of Rocky Mountain House. Over the weekend, the long weekend, there was a cougar attack on a little boy. Our Arthur Green is talking to the boy's mother at the moment. The little kid suffered terrible scarring. Over 200 staples were needed to sew up his wounds, and looks like the Fish and Game people have euthanized the offending cougar. So that story will be coming up shortly, Cory.
Great. Yeah, it's scary stuff with those cougars. You know, they typically keep to themselves, but boy, when they decide to go for people, it can have some awful outcomes. It's a good thing that kid got away, at least.
They are. I mean, you know what? Usually you don't even notice them until they're on your back with their teeth plunging into your neck. So the kid had a lucky escape, and will have scars for life to prove it.
Yeah, well, it'll be a good conversation piece when he's picking up the gals in another 15 years or so in the bar, I guess.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, Dave. We will check in again, or I'll talk to you after the show.
Thanks, Cory.
Right on. That is our news editor, Dave Naylor. Lots on the go, lots breaking, as we're seeing. Yeah, Arthur's talking directly to the mother of that poor kid out there. And we have reporters across the country constantly coming up with new content for us. Of course, it's because of you guys. This is what I like to remind everybody. It's because you guys have been subscribing, and we really appreciate it. Thousands of people have subscribed. This is how independent media can beat controlled media. This is how we can beat tax-funded media. Media that's beholden to the government is because we're beholden to you. So you guys who have subscribed already, we really appreciate it. And if you haven't yet, guys, hey, go to westernstandard.news/membership. Take it out. It's $99 for a year, $10 a month. You can get a free trial, see if it's worth it. And again, I like saying it over and over because I don't believe in much so in charity or bigging. This isn't asking for a donation. We're providing a service, and we're just asking you guys to pay for it, just like a newspaper subscription used to. And it helps us continue to expand and keep things going, keep this studio expanding and all of that stuff. So get on there, guys. Take out a subscription. Share these subscriptions. Let other people know. This is how you can do it. This is why you don't have to listen to the CBC and CTV and Globe and Mail or the Toronto Red Star. Support independent media. Take out a subscription, and it's worth it. You'll see. All right, I'll just go through a few of the comments before I get to my guest in that too. I see, some of the direction there, discussion from the earlier rant I had. Somebody saying, Jordan Cron saying, so a 500 beater could become a $5,000 beater. I think it may possibly can. Like if you look at the news and what's going on, and these motor companies, and they're saying, oh, we're gonna retool the plant. Well, part of the reason is because the government's punishing them for not to. And the other part is the government's tossing them billions of tax dollars to retool and move on to electric vehicle production. The problem is, well, two things. I mean, for one, it'd be like the oil companies who have allowed the government to push them around and didn't stand up for themselves. It's never enough. You're dealing with ideological environmental fanatics. So quit pandering to them, quit bending over for them. It's not going to work. The other thing is with these plants, though, is it's not viable. It's not viable. Even if everybody suddenly started buying them, it's, as I said, we don't have the infrastructure. Where's the new hydroelectric dams? Where's the new nuclear plants? Where's the new even natural gas or coal burning facilities for these electric vehicles? Where are the charging stations? We don't have any of it. We can't sustain it. Even if we switch to electric, we are incapable of managing it. But I think a lot of the government know that. They do know that. They don't care. So that's what'll happen is you've got these unrealistic, expensive electric vehicles. Plus, because of the lack of production, combustion engine vehicles are going to be hard to come by. And as supply and demand dictates, suddenly that $500 beater could become a $5,000 beater because nobody else is going to be able to get anything else. And hey, they want you out of your cars. But think about that. If you can only get around by bus and by plane and by train, they own you. They own you. You can't go where you please anymore. You can't make a trip just any spot you want to. That's a wet dream for an authoritarian. So yeah, it's not to be taken lightly. Either way, we can talk more about that a little later. I'll finish up just with that talk on cougars. I live in Pritis. I have a house that backs into the bush. Now and then I post those up on my Facebook and Twitter account. We got a game camera back there, and that shows how scary cougars are. Because I get the cougars behind my house actually semi-regularly. They walk by on that game trail behind my place, only like 150 feet from my kitchen door in the back. But I've worked 20 years as a surveyor in the field, everywhere from the Arctic down to Texas. I grew up in Banff. That's my hometown. I worked in the bush countless hours. Live in Pritis, cougars in my backyard all the time. My whole life, I've never seen a live cougar. I've seen tracks, I've seen dead ones, I've seen them on my game camera, but I've never seen one. We can know that a lot of them have seen me. There's no doubt about that. And that's what's really scary about them as predators. And if you look at the statistics for them, they very, very rarely attack people. They're cats. They attack when they're sure they can win. That's why children are extra vulnerable. They instinctively go for the little ones. And it's so fortunate that poor young kid survived, at least, even though he is pretty ripped up. And if you look statistically, women get attacked far more than men by cougars. Again, typically because they're smaller. So they're very rare when they attack, but we do have them in Alberta. Never forget about the possibility. Oh, there, Nico's fast. He found a picture of one of them there. That's from, just a few months back behind my house there. That's standing there looking down at my house in the night. That was a cougar in my backyard, basically. They're back there, but I never see them. Oh, yeah, and there's pictures of the bears and the bobcats that we get back there, too. I get a lot of critters in my yard, but you never actually see them till they want you to see them. So if you're out, though, it is a good warning for people. It's very rare, but if you got young kids, if, you're a small woman or whatever, move in numbers. Don't turn your back if you're in the mountains or areas known for cougars, because, what a horrifying thought that one could snatch your child up and take off with them like that. It's, rare, but it's certainly something you never, ever want to encounter in that bad way. All right. Let's get on to our first guest for the day. It's Kelly Malmberg. He's been on before, and I appreciate that because, with all the crazy experience I've had in the working world and travels and everything, I have never been a farmer. In fact, I'm a terribly inept gardener, and as we saw, even my beekeeping has had its challenges. So when we talk about important things like food production, we got to talk to the specialists. We got some real threats coming along to our food security these days. So, hey, Kelly, thanks for coming in to talk to us today.
Hey, Cory.
So, yeah, I mean, I know you watch things, of course, for a very good reason, very closely in the agricultural sector. And a lot of things that have been making the news lately are proposed, at least, reductions in certain types of fertilizers and things that agricultural producers can use. And it's really got a lot of people very concerned. Maybe if you could just kind of explain how a 30% reduction would impact farm production right now.
Well, yeah, that's quite a crazy proposal. 30% reduction in fertilizer. It's hard to put a number on that because depends on what you grow. But if they do go with this, you're probably going to see 15 to 20% reduction on your cereal crops, your oil seeds. We have a lot of crops that we do grow that fix their own nitrogen, like all our pulse crops, lentils, pea crops. But I would say you're going to see a reduction for sure, Cory.
Yeah, and with that high cost of living, I mean, in general, we're looking, especially for things that are essential for us. I mean, if crops come down, prices are going to go up, and these are our food items. So, I mean, it's going to damage every consumer, not just the producers.
Yeah, I guess that's one silver lining is, our grain prices are probably going to go up. They're up pretty high right now, but as always, with Canada, with this carbon tax, we just keep getting beaten down. And you look at our neighbors to the south, it's business as usual in the States. They're not doing a 30% reduction on their fertilizers. So we're at the disadvantage again on the Americans.
Well, and the carbon tax is impacting agricultural producers as well. And that's something that frustrates as well. Of course, I was watching that the other day when the carbon tax rebates were coming to people, and a lot of Liberal supporters, see, look, it all comes back to you. It all comes back. It doesn't cost anybody anything. They don't realize that this impacts production and consumer products, and they are going to pay a higher price for things because of that tax, even if it's not direct.
Yeah, for sure. Like, fertilizers up, heating, like anything heating, our shops, fuel. If we have to dry grain this year, which it could happen, we have, since I talked to you last, we've had some pretty good rains. These crops look really good. And so we're looking at a late harvest, and, there's going to be a lot of natural gas used to try to get these crops dried down so that they can be stored properly. So yeah, operating costs are way up for sure because of the carbon tax.
Yeah, and those grain dryers, I mean, they look almost like a giant version of a clothing dryer, if I recall, and they're circular, but they burn a heck of a lot of natural gas. So the carbon tax is going to have a very direct impact on the cost of using those sorts of tools.
Yeah, you bet. We've been lucky the last few years. We've had some pretty good harvests and kind of an open harvest. We were done before things got too ugly, but I've got some crops that are at least a month away. For my canola is just coming out of flower. And so things are looks like it might be a long harvest this year. And we're going to be running those grain dryers for sure. Well, hopefully not, but it's looking that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, and as you pointed out, there's other ways with nitrogen replacement, different type of crops you can rotate, things such as that. And I mean, it reminds me of the energy sector too. Like people don't get credit for the activities they've already been doing to reduce emissions. Even if some of the reasons, you wanted to reduce the nitrogen, well, it's expensive. So if you can run field peas for a year and help replenish the soil, you'll do that. I mean, you've already been reducing some of the uses for these things just in a cost-effective manner, but you don't get any credit for that.
No, that's right. We, like our farmers, we're not farming like the 80s anymore. We don't work our land up. It's no-till farming. We're doing precision farming, so and variable rate technology. So when these are high-tech outfits, and our farmers, these guys are, got degrees, and they've got a lot of schooling behind them, and they're putting this fertilizer where it needs to be. Soil tests are done every spring now. We're not just dumping fertilizer out there and hoping that we're going to grow a bigger crop. We can't afford it. Fertilizer this spring was about double what it was before. So we can go to stuff like variable rate technology. We can reduce the amount of fertilizer we're putting where it's not needed. Like if you look at the Netherlands right now, we're trying to be like the Netherlands. They farm in a bathtub. They're below sea level, and they're about 16 times smaller than the province of Alberta. So it's a pretty intensive agricultural area. And, we're being compared to that. And, we're a mile above sea level in Alberta. And especially in areas like Vulcan County and in southern Alberta, that leaching of these nutrients into our watersheds is very low. We've got some good farmers out there. So I'm really scratching my head as to why, this is just a feel-good program for Trudeau, and it really makes no sense at this time. We are evolving. We're trying new technology, but we have 8 billion people to feed. and people want big crops, and to grow big crops, we got to put the groceries to it. And so we're putting the fertilizer down, and we're putting it where it's needed. And until we can do something different, this is just a really bad timing on this proposal.
Well, that's it. And I wrote a piece on this a while back. I did some research, and the human population in the last 100 years has gone up fivefold, but crop yields per acre in modern farms has also gone up fivefold. But I mean, things such as modern effective fertilizer practices, pesticides, and some other things are the reason you can get so much per acre. And as you mentioned, there's not an alternative. It's similar to kind of my earlier rant too about vehicles. Okay, you want to get all the gas vehicles off the road. Fair enough. But you got to give us something else to get into, and it's not there yet. And just banning certain types of fertilizer use if you don't have an alternative, it could be catastrophic. I mean, they got to come up with the alternate first.
Yeah, it was I was listening to, there's that ag radio, it's on Sirius XM, channel 147. And the ag PhD guy, he's always on about 1 o'clock in the afternoons. And somebody asked him what he thought of Canada. He's an American, but somebody asked him a question, what's his thoughts on this reduction? And he made a good point. He said that, farming, I don't think people realize that farming and forestry, we're a huge carbon. We sequester a lot of carbon. So a lot of carbon is taken in by the plant. So if you reduce the amount of fertilizer, you're growing less plant, you have less plant to take in that excessive carbon, which, was a really good point. So, we grow more crop, we're taking more carbon in as well. And I don't think people realize that farmers are one of the biggest, the industry really takes in a lot of that excessive carbon, and by cutting back, we're going to have less crop to take that in. I don't know if that's, it was just an interesting point I heard yesterday. So
yeah, it is. And I mean, everything's kind of integrated. The other thing is too, if more pressure is put on, I mean, we've got land that hasn't been developed agriculturally, and not just in Canada, but other parts of the world. And if a living can't be made, or if the prices are getting too high for those commodities because of some of these limitations, the incentive is there now to expand and cultivate more land then to try and keep up. And we've got natural areas that could be threatened through this too. Like, this can have the opposite effect and actually make things worse for the environment, but they just don't seem to understand that.
Well, that's a good point, Cory. We've got a lot of grassland, out east in the eastern part of the Vulcan County, a lot of native grass that was broke back in the 30s. A lot of homesteaders came up, and we've got places that should never be broken again. But it's like the organic farming argument. If get rid of fertilizer or herbicides, fertilizers, insecticides, we could never at this time, unless we develop our technology better, we couldn't feed the world if we didn't have these products, and we would be ripping up more land than we should. All of eastern Alberta along the Saskatchewan border, we'd have to break more land up, and it'd be catastrophic. Those guys tried it. They lasted about 10 years, and it went back to grass in a hurry because it's just not sustainable.
Yeah, there's a lot of sensitive wildlife populations out there: sage grouse, burrowing owls, antelope. I mean, they only have so much land left, really, that's unbroken that they rely on out there. And I mean, if the government bans us from, I guess, producing on that land, well, it'll save those critters, but then we still end up with a food shortage. It just seems to be such an inane policy they're pushing towards right now.
Yeah, we're really going to have, fingers crossed. I hope the hail cloud stays away, but excuse me, but we're going to make up for last year. I'm looking at my wheat this morning. I got a really nice crop coming, and those rains, there was a lot of areas that were pretty dry, and this really helps. So, we're going to pick up the slack for the world on this grain shortage. So what a time, Ace. You imagine if we had to cut 30% fertilizer, you're going to see some big crop export this year out of Canada, thanks to how we farm and thanks to the weather. But yeah, I think Canada's really going to help out the world this year, especially with what's going on in the Ukraine. So yeah, things look good. I just hope, these initiatives like this are really going to work against the farmer and the consumer.
Yeah, well, and right now, I mean, it's still proposed, but I mean, they're pretty solid about what they want to do, but they haven't said how or legislated anything formally yet. So is there any movement on the part of agricultural producers to organize, push back, lobby against this idea? Or?
Well, they've, I guess there's still a discussion period. And like you mentioned, we're obviously looking at worst case scenario, and, a lot could change. a lot of the municipalities have started writing letters at the agricultural service boards to the Minister of Agriculture in Ottawa. But I've been an ag fieldman here for Vulcan County for 25 years. Letters don't seem to go very far anymore. They just kind of get shuffled in the filing cabinet. I think when the date gets closer and we know what's going to happen, I think you'll see guys wake up a little bit. I think it's in its infancy right now, so we're just kind of waiting to see what comes out. I don't know how if they do go forward with this and do have a concrete number to cut. Ag Canada has a skeleton of a staff since the Harper days. They've cut Ag Canada's staff by a lot. I don't know if they're going to have a fertilizer police going out, if they're going to audit our annual purchase of fertilizer. But I think right now I wouldn't get too worked up. I think what's going on in the Netherlands has maybe woke the world up a little bit. But we're people are watching, and I guess we'll just see what unfolds in the next couple of years, Cory.
Yeah, and I mean, we want to keep it in the scroll at least and discuss it. Or of course, if we don't, then they'll definitely impose something ridiculous, unfortunately. We have to. This flies under the radar. Agricultural producers are a minority among Canadians. I mean, there's only so many people now who do it. There's a small family can manage a much larger area than it used to be 100 years ago. But it also means it's a limited voice when there's pressures coming on. Something interesting, another fellow who's up in northern Saskatchewan that I know, and he's an agricultural producer, but he's saying, he's tired. He's kind of had enough. He was thinking of some more expansion and capital investment next year, but now he's thinking, maybe I'm just going to pull up and just retire and sell off and get out. And, these pressures have an impact even when it's a threatened policy change, before it even comes in. I mean, there just needs to be a little more respect shown to the people feeding us right now.
Yeah, well, a good example, Cory. I farm between Blackie Harrington country and about 100-year generation farm, just sold 1,000 acres, and it got into a bidding war. We're in pretty good farmland country, and it went for average just under $7,000 an acre for a dryland crop, and it went to the Hutterites. So that's where it's going. Big farms and the colonies. You just kind of and I don't blame these guys. Same thing as your friend there. That's a lot of money for 1,000 acres, $7 million. I'm sure Trudeau and his capital gains will take half of it. But guys are getting bigger. The smaller guys are getting out. Between me and my brother, we have 1,000 acres, and by the time I'm done and he's done, we'll probably be done as well. So that's just the way things are going.
No, well, it's unfortunate, but we'll keep pushing. I mean, it's just so important to all of us. I mean, not just in the sad aspect of a multi-generational kind of industry and lifestyle kind of falling by the wayside. Some of that's just changing times as well, but all the same, some of it is just bad government policy. That's just not a good enough excuse to make such changes like that. So, well, hey, it's never hopeless. We got to just keep pushing and defending, and maybe we'll get a good outcome eventually.
Well, and that's the big thing is I get, like, you've seen me on Twitter, I get so mad. But 90% of, I guess you said earlier, 80% of Canada is 2 generations off the farm. And there's people that are savvy and follow what's going on in the world, but nobody knows how farms hardly work anymore. But they're quick to judge. I got into it last week, and I don't know why. You've seen me on there. I need to get off Twitter, but man, some of these people know nothing about agriculture. And they're a couple generations off the farm, but they are very good armchair quarterback farmers. And it's tough. They need to get out on the farm and come see how things work, see what we're doing. Most farmers would love to show the urban world, especially the left urban world, how things are done. Grassroots. We're losing grassroots in this country, in the world, but especially Canada right now.
Yeah, well, and unfortunately, a lot of those people and those willfully ignorant ones will suddenly realize it when their grocery bills go through the roof. But by then, the damage is already done, and it'd be better to prevent it. But I mean, hey, Twitter, it's an entertainment area. You just got to learn how to stir them up and then back off. And as per my coffee cup, enjoy the liberal tears. If you can stir them up on there, use it as a vent. But I know it can be hard on us to get on there and get too wound up sometimes.
Well, Lee, you're a lot smarter at it than me. I go a little too far, and then I get up at 2 a.m. and delete everything I put on there.
Yeah. Well, I have my moments as well. All right. Well, thanks for coming on to talk to me today, Kelly. It's always good to have you on, and it's good to hear, that there's a good season at least building up, and let's hope the weather maintains. And, as you said, it's good for the whole world right now. We're in some pretty crazy times, and getting a lot of food out there into the world market is going to be good for a lot of people.
Yeah, you bet. No, I just can't believe how much better things got here this summer. There was no wind, as you probably noticed, just a nice summer, caught some nice rains, and it's going to be some pretty big cereal crops. Wheat crops are going to be big. Barley is going to be big. Lots decent hay. I don't think it was bumper crop hay, but we are really going to pick up our world grain ending stocks out of Canada anyways. Things look pretty good if we have a good harvest.
Right on. Well, we'll check in with you again down the road, and hopefully at that point you're talking about how great the harvest was.
Okay, sounds good, Cory. Take care.
Thanks, Kelly. Yes, that was Kelly Malmberg. He's a producer down in kind of South Central Alberta, out by Blackie area. And, we just need to have these discussions. And I mean, some people can't be faulted in a sense. Hey, if you were born and raised urban, you never worked out of town, you just don't necessarily know what's going on out there. Fair enough. But there's some pressures going on, and there, things that, hey, when weather does things, I know some people think, I guess, climate change legislation can change weather. Who knows? But that can be accepted. But when it's bad government policy putting those pressures on, such as carbon tax, such as meddling with fertilizers, we all pay that price. It's just the agriculture producers pay it first. So this is kind of, I see, as the canary in the coal mine, guys. They're concerned. They're pointing out there's differences. As Kelly was saying, people are trying to compare practices in the Netherlands with practices in Alberta. Well, it's a totally different climate, totally different elevation. You can't, it's not as simple as that, especially when we're talking nowadays with high intensity production. As he said, the larger outfits are who we're purchasing now too. And Hutterites, Paradoxy asked about that. Do the Hutterites, Mennonites use the same fertilizers? And if so, can their advocates bring their voices into the convo? Well, a couple of things. Hutterites tend to be stay out of the media and things. They try to keep a low profile, though I've seen some colonies speak up. The reality is that small farms, just can't be profitable these days. You do have to have a large operation in order to be viable and feasible. And Hutterites are very effective of that. They of course work as a collective. You got a lot of labor. They can buy a lot of land. I tell you, you always know Hutterite land when you're working on it. Like as a surveyor, you almost know. Well, I knew from the permits, but they don't waste an inch, I tell you. I mean, they will drain every slough. They will run that crop right up to the edge of the roadside as close as legally possible. They are very efficient producers. And the other thing is utilizing the same fertilizers. They use chemical fertilizers and things like everybody else. They do also, they're very efficient. I know working one time in a field, I think it was up by Forestburg. And they collect, of course, everything from the pig barns and everything from their own waste and you name it in a cesspool, and they compost it and treat it however they have to so that it can be sprayed on a field. And oh, wow, is it ever gnarly. Oh, you smell that from miles away when they're spraying around when you're surveying it. It's nasty, but it's effective. It's good. It's proper use of the land, actually, and then they can't be knocked for it. But man, it's a pretty brutal funk when they do that. All the same, that's not, that's a supplement to chemical fertilizers. It's not realistically out there for large, producers and farmers in general. I mean, you can do things to reduce, but you still, if we want the kind of numbers we have, if we want to keep people fed, the 8 billion people in the world, we've got to use modern fertilizers, pesticides, herbicides. We can get new developments, we can get better at it, and we have. But until then, we've got to use what we got. All right, let's talk about one of our sponsors, guys. And these guys, I'm going to say it correctly this time with that option. It's Resistance Coffee. And if you're tired of having leftism rammed down your throat everywhere you turn, and you do, just not on this show. Are you frustrated, though, by businesses giving support and money to leftist causes? We see that all the time. We see companies in Calgary donating against to anti-oil companies. Well, Resistance Coffee is here for you. Now you can enjoy the wonderful taste of fresh roasted coffee with the knowledge your money isn't funding leftist causes you despise. In fact, they take 10% of every purchase, so they do support causes. 10%, and they give it to organizations that are fighting for your constitutional freedoms, such as the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. They got the Liberty Coalition, Fight the Fines. Go to resistancecoffee.com. Nice, easy one to remember. And if you go resistancecoffee.com/triggered, you get 10% off on your first order. And these guys, it's great on every run. You don't get that stale grocery coffee. It's actually good. I mean, you don't have to gag down some bad coffee to make a political point. Their coffee is fantastic. And as you can see, they got the different names for them: black gold, liberal tears. That's one of them. I do love this mug that they sent out here. I just love drinking liberal tears. Empty promises, for the decaf. It's nice, quirky things. Defund the CBC, of course, which we'd all love to do. They got those nice names. It's good quality coffee. It gets delivered to your place. And you know that 10% of your purchase goes towards a good cause. And hey, you get another 10% off that if you go to resistancecoffee.com/triggered and buy it with that, and you get that discount. And it lets them know, of course, that you found them through this show. So, hey, get out there and support these guys. It's win-win-win. You get some great coffee. They sell these mugs on there too, and all sorts of other merchandise. Check them out, guys, and support freedoms with resistancecoffee.com. All right, let's see what else we got going on in the news out here. I got a few items I wanted to get into. I'm just scrolling up. Yeah, sponsors keep along. We're going to get a better teleprompter soon too, so I'm not looking down. It's coming. Here's something that's of concern. The NDP, quarterly numbers provincially, raised more than 1.4 million from 3,200 unique contributions in the second quarter in Alberta. Now, the UCP leadership race is going on. We're concerned about a lot of things. One of the biggest fears, you can't underestimate the NDP. These guys are strong. They're well organized. They've got a lot of money. I've been very, favorable of Danielle Smith's campaign in the sense that I like where she came in the debate. I like how she's shaking the establishment. But some of the case for people opposing her is a bit valid in that, can she beat the NDP, though? I mean, if she can win the UCP, that's fine. But the second half of the battle is beating Notley's NDP. I don't know. I like to think she can, but we've got to be really careful with a lot of things. And we can't write off the NDP. People call it I've called it that, the accidental government. I think to a degree it was. It was a fluke of a number of circumstances, but a lot of people did vote for them. A lot of people did enjoy them. And a lot of people will vote for them again, because there's a lot of stupid people out there. That's just the reality. So do not discount the NDP. They raised $1.5 million almost in a quarter in Alberta. They are going to be fighting next year's election hard. And I mean, they get that union money pouring in there. Oh, they can't get directly from unions anymore. Don't worry. They have, when you've got that network of people well paid on the government lucre, sucking your tax dollars out into public service unions, they give it back. It gets filtered through and they get their money. Cheryl Dawn saying everybody should be buying their fuel from UFA in Alberta, 15 cents cheaper, and it's free to get a card. UFA. So I didn't realize it's still lower. So yeah, there's some in the cities, and of course they're in a lot of rural areas. And that's the United Farmers Association. Just a little trivia tidbit for a bunch of people. That is the exact same UFA that was actually the party forming the government of Alberta for some years, about 100 years ago. They were replaced by the Social Credit Party. And it's got to be the only place in the world where a governing political party, once getting knocked out of office, actually decided to create a farmers co-op and a commercial business, because the UFA supply stores and everything too, for agricultural supply and that are all over, and gas stations. It's just kind of a strange development from a political party. You won't see the Liberal Party of Canada gas stations and grocery stores or something if they get kicked out of office down the road. But the UFA is actually, it's not a coincidental name. That's the same company. And I guess you can get much cheaper fuel from them right now. Sylvia saying $986.37 per hour to run a tractor and air seeder just for fuel. So, and again, for people, those air seeders, I mean, it's amazing how advanced that stuff goes. I'm not an expert. I just seen them at work, and that seeder's behind the tractor, and you see all of those hoses. And again, this is very high-tech, well-regulated seeding of a field. They don't waste anything. It's gotten so much better. But again, it's a big unit. And yeah, look at that cost. And when you add carbon tax costs on top of that, to hell with your stupid little rebate system. This is pressuring these producers. And it comes down to us. Of course, the producer has to raise their price. It's simple economics. But unfortunately, the left never could understand simple economics, can they? And we're all paying a price for it. Sylvia is also saying Syntax is 2 cents cheaper than UFA right now. So, I mean, what I'm seeing with a lot of these coming around, which is good, though, is that we're seeing some competition in the gas stations. Because I think we were kind of, and I talked to Dan McTeague about that a little while back. They were kind of screwing us a little in Alberta for a bit. They really didn't drop their prices fast enough to reflect the actual prices in the wholesale market. But that seems to have stopped. And the way that breaks, see, rather than having government jump in and tell them how to sell or what to sell, eventually some stations broke ranks. It began with UFA, and now others are saying, no, we're going to cut our prices so that I can get this traffic into my place, and Bob down the road with his gas station won't. And eventually it will settle down to the proper level of price for that product. I'd rather not government get in on those sorts of things, even if they do screw us now and then once in a while when they get together. And, you know, the bigger problem we have is carbon taxes with a government that fights our local oil and gas development, things like that. That's what puts upward pressure on those prices. That no matter what a local retailer can do, they can only bring their price so low. They still have to pay the bills. I'm just looking through the comments to see what we got going on. Lots of discussion. Yeah, Trudeau and the UN have rocks in their head that's scrambling their brains. Yeah, that could be believable. The Green New Agenda, just so much damage. And, you know, I think the ideology is mixed both ways. I think a lot of people do think that these initiatives really will save the world. They think it's a great thing to save the planet with these things. But a lot of the others, and we can see, it's always tied in with control. It's about control. As I said in the opening monologue, if they can get us out of our vehicles, they can control our movements. How would the government response be if the agricultural sector collapsed? If they finally pressured and pushed and got it so bad and so far along that it collapsed, they'll nationalize it. They've done this before. When the government screwed the Alberta energy sector so badly that wasn't properly servicing us, you know what they did? They created Petro-Canada. That was government owned for decades. Say, well, that's okay. We don't need those big bad oil companies. We'll do it. Well, guess what Petro-Canada did? They lost money chronically until they finally privatized it. It doesn't work. Now imagine the government that is spending billions of dollars trying to fix their own payroll system. And you want them to be in charge of our food supply? My God, I could lose a few pounds. That's fine. But I mean, I'm not to the point of starving to death, because that's what would happen. And, you know, this is scary. And these changes, these things they push are about control. They aren't about the environment. The environment is just an excuse for these guys, an excuse to keep infringing on our rights. They love the word emergency these days. Look at Jody Gondek. She declares an emergency every few hours, it seems, in Calgary. $87 billion for a climate plan for Calgary. It's insane. But the first thing she did when she got in office, it's a climate emergency. We've now had the COVID-19 emergency. Now in the San Francisco and some other areas, we've got the monkeypox emergency. As long as they can say emergency and get everybody afraid, they can use that as an excuse to step on our rights further. So quit being afraid. Quit listening to these assholes when they say it's an emergency. It's not. It's not. There's things to be addressed, but it's not always an emergency. Unless the fire is on my doorstep, it's not an emergency. Quit telling me it is, and I don't want to give up my damn rights. But we fall for that. We fall for that. I mean, you know, the Americans, they're going to be in for their battles over the firearms. I think they got room to improve it, for sure, with their legislation and how it applies. But I remember when Biden was talking about firearm deaths being a health emergency. I remember him using those terms a couple of years ago. And see, there's the keywords. There's health and emergency. In Canada, Trudeau implemented the War Measures Act against people because they're protesting against their health emergency. What other ways will they infringe on rights if they think it's an emergency? It makes them feel inside that they've got some moral authority to step on individual rights. And it also sells it to the public, the people who believe the crap out of the government. So as they start attacking our farms, our agricultural producers, be afraid, people. Be very afraid. And yeah, I'm going to get on to my guest here with Chris Oldcorn. I see him in the lobby, and we'll talk about some other things now. And I'm certain I'll be having some more ranting about the news after that. So let's bring Chris in and see what's going on out in Saskatchewan there. Hey, how's it going, Chris?
It's going well. How are you, Cory?
Good. You know, I'm just venting and ranting as I typically do and getting it out of my system. So poor Jane doesn't have to listen to it at home.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to comment on the whole farming thing you were just talking about. Tomorrow, I'm actually interviewing the person who's in charge of importing fertilizer into Brazil because they used to get it all from Russia. Now they can't. And so it's actually affecting their farming. They're not able to produce as much food as they did before because they have a huge fertilizer shortage. So something to look forward to after I have that interview. But he's basically what I've done over email with so far with the individual. It's basically he's saying, without the fertilizer, our crops, we can't grow enough. So now we're going to be in a position where we're going to have to import more food because we can't get enough fertilizer because of the entire situation. And if you look at the reductions, like I did the story on last week about the fertilizer reductions here in Canada, well, it's going to affect the ability of farmers to grow the same amount of food on the same piece of land, which once again pushes food prices up and can cause what you were talking about, an actual real shortage of food.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. It is going to be interesting seeing what you hear on that. And I hadn't heard that part about Brazil, but it doesn't surprise me. And I was talking to my prior guest, who was an agricultural producer, Kelly, and we were talking about, well, if farmers can't produce as much per acre, they often have to move outwards, which could lead into some sensitive grasslands and things. It'll have a counter effect. It'll be worse for the environment. But Brazil, South America has gotten a lot better over the years, because it used to be a real problem, for those of us a little grayer to remember, with slash and burn farming. You needed more room.
Yes.
You cut into the rainforest or the jungle more, and you seeded it, and you just worked that land to death, and then you just kept expanding, and it was terrible for the environment. A lot of the reason they've been able to cut back on that is because they've been able to revitalize and fertilize and get high yields from the existing land, and they were able to feed people. And you make them desperate, the cutting more acreage of forest when it's dealing with starvation, they're going to cut the forest.
Yeah, and they still are having to cut the forest to get more farmland, and they're still doing it right now because they don't have a choice. If they want to feed their people, they need more land. Instead of maximizing the land they have, just in Canada, a lot of farmers over the last few years have been able to double their output just simply because of using fertilizers to help grow their product faster and better. So I don't understand this from Trudeau. I don't understand a lot from him, but going after food supplies, housing, cars, every single thing that there are kitchen table issues. You want a roof over your head, you want food, and you want to be able to drive around to get the food and do stuff with your family. And the federal government seems to want you to do none of the three. It amazes me.
Yeah, and it's the essential items that they put the cost through the roof on us with, such as food, housing, energy. Meanwhile, the only consumer items that are getting cheaper are the ones we really don't seem to need much. Look how cheap it is to get a giant widescreen TV these days. Or I remember actually leasing my very first computer for $3,000 in 1994. And nowadays I can buy a laptop for $600 that's, infinitely more powerful. But it doesn't matter if I can't pay for my food and housing.
Yeah, my very first computer was an MS-DOS computer, and it was about $3,000.
Yeah.
And that was in like the mid 1980s, $3,000, not like $3,000 today. I can only imagine what that would actually cost today if computers didn't get cheaper.
Oh yeah, it was quite a luxury. So it's just when they're attacking the most important of our consumer goods, it's just an ugly future we got going on. So maybe we'll talk about you're going to be. You mentioned that at the meeting this morning. A piece coming out soon. We're talking. Speaking of the biggest and most intrusive possible government programs, universal basic income.
Yes, there has been obviously. CERB was essentially like a universal basic income, almost like a trial, so to speak. Obviously, we see the results of that. The government can't afford it. That's why they more than doubled the debt. 2/3 of adults in Canada had some sort of income support through the government during COVID. Now, some of that was indirectly with employers being given money to help pay for their employees and things like that. So it wasn't just the CERB program. And I mentioned that in my story too as well, but CERB was the main part that was basically like a universal basic income. Now, the interesting thing is, after doing some research, I even found an article by David Frum that he wrote back in 2014 on universal basic income. And surprisingly, there's people on the left and the right that support a universal basic income. They just want it done differently. So the left wants it to be in addition to existing programs. Whereas people on the right, they want to eliminate the programs and just use a one system universal basic income, which in my opinion, of the two options, that would be the one that would make the most sense. And then I talk about the three different ways that both sides talk about doing a universal basic income. One is everybody gets the same amount. So it doesn't matter if you're Jeff Bezos or us, we both would get the same amount per year, For example, let's say $20,000 a year is the universal basic income. You and I would get that, and so would the wealthiest people. Then there's a sort of a middle of the road approach where you get your 20,000, and then as you earn money above that at your job, there'd be like a 50% clawback on it. And then the cheapest version would be 100% clawback. So if you made $40,000, you would not be making anything under the 100% clawback thing. You would just have your 40,000. So there's different ways of doing it. But even I found people on both the left and right that actually said none of it's actually affordable. So they I talked about a professor from over in Belgium, who's one of the big proponents in the scholarly community about universal basic income. And even he admits that it's not affordable. But he's made an entire career writing about it. But he admits, I'm not sure if any country could actually afford to do this. And then there was another professor, economics guy, and he said basically, like an adequate level of universal basic income for everyone is unaffordable. And he even admits it. So you have both a sociology professor and an economics professor. They're the two leading scholars in the world on UBI in the academic community, basically saying it's unaffordable. Frum basically says it's unaffordable, but it would make sense. And actually, I included a quote from a Heritage Foundation speech that Utah Senator Mike Lee said about universal basic income. And he said he's kind of for it because right now in the US, they have 79 different means-tested programs that people apply for. And imagine if you slashed all 79 of those different programs, how much money you'd have left over. And so he's even advocating it for it from a, like, let's just simplify the government and shrink it in size. So the left wants to grow government with the UBI, but the right wants to shrink government by using a UBI. It's quite a very interesting scenario to be in. And it's almost like it's sort of a capitalist version of communism. And you have people like, for example, self-proclaimed Democratic Socialist Bernie Sanders campaigned on the universal basic income twice. Now, he lost both times. But when he tried to become president, that's something he campaigned very strongly on. And there was a lot of support for it, particularly among young people. But that's mainly because Bernie Sanders, for some reason, was like the guy that was able to get young people excited about politics. So,
yeah, well, as I see a commenter kind of said it, he hit the nail on the head. You know, Heko Nelsaka, I think it is, said, yes, just like communism, you didn't do it right, but we'll get it right next time. The thing is that whether it's right or left, we get more of the impression that it's a pie in the sky theory that if it worked as it's supposed to, could be magnificent. But like my fear when I see conservatives saying we could, as you said, you know, you could get rid of 79 programs or whatever it was and replace it with this. Fine, absolutely. But in knowing politics, the temptation, even if somehow you did that, the next election, somebody's going to campaign on returning another program. And somebody's going to try and buy support in this particular community over here by bringing this extra support program in. And the next thing you know, now you've got a massive universal basic income program, plus all of these extra programs that will start coming and adding to it. Even if the best of intentions started it, it won't end well. That's my view on it anyways. And as you said, there's never really been a workable form of it used anywhere in the world yet that I know of.
Well, they did do one trial here in Canada, and they did one trial at a city in California, but it wasn't really a universal basic income. They actually just took people who were on welfare and increased the amount of money they received, and then tested to see if it improved their lives. Now, that is basically the only two tests that ever happened. And the one that happened in Canada happened back in the 70s, and it was scrapped, ironically, by Trudeau's father. And Trudeau has talked about a universal basic income. So it's kind of a family conflict there at the Christmas dinner table if his father was still alive.
Yeah, well, it's a, I don't know, broad policy, and you can see the appeal for people if it's on a campaign, especially in hard times, if they're not looking deeper into the policy itself. But it just, I think there was an experiment in Finland they tried for a while as well with it, and at the end of the experiment, it didn't work out. Despite the best wishes, they realized that I think the main problem they had was it did act as a disincentive for people to get back to work. Contrary to a lot of people saying, oh, no, even if you have a scaled return to the workforce, people will do so. A lot of people, not all of them, but a lot are just going to say, well, if I can pay my bills on this, I'm not going to bother.
Yeah, and even if someone like even Milton Friedman actually advocated for what he called a negative tax.
Yeah.
So you would start minus $20,000 a year or whatever, and then as you earned your money through the year, eventually it would be a further distance for you to actually get to the point of actually pay tax. Now, why start it at minus 20? Why not just raise whatever the level is for the tax? Why do you have to start at minus 20? If you want to let people earn 40,000 tax free, just start at 40,000. Don't put it at 20,000. Have everybody start at minus 20. You're still starting at the same starting line. It's ridiculous. But anyways, even Friedman actually has advocated for UBI, which is he's one of the biggest libertarian conservative economic thinkers of the past 100 years.
Yeah.
Who I strongly recommend reading because you will learn a lot about economics from him.
Oh, absolutely.
Him and Hayek are great. Yeah, two of my favorites.
Yeah, Hayek, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, also a lot of that though was in economic theory. That their work wasn't necessarily into the implementation and practice. So I mean, just because you can say a program's great doesn't mean it can work. Well, we'll go from that. I'm looking forward to your column. We'll see at length, you know, what you've come up with on that. So I'm pointing people towards it. Watch for Chris's column coming up. Otherwise, in the news, one that kind of topped your story recently was kind of strange and rough. Was that abuse of Saskatchewan students in a Christian school? There's a class action suit. Sounds like starting now. What happened there?
Basically, starting back about 1988 to about 2010, this school had very interesting discipline practices. Let's just say it didn't follow in what you would find in a normal school. I'll just give one example. There was one student who was homosexual. He was 16 years old. He told one of the teachers about it, and then he had a meeting with the principal, and then they suspended him from the school. Then him and his mom went to the houses of the teacher, thinking that the meeting was about how they could get him back into the school, and it ended up being an exorcism, or attempted anyways. And they tried to pray the demons out of him for over an hour, as they called it, the gay demons. And then that didn't work. So then they beat him with a paddle, and then that didn't work. Now, this church had a book of, they called it the Spiritual Discipline Book, which was for parents, how to discipline your kids when they have certain issues. And they even used to sell paddles in the church gift shop of different sizes to use on your children. Now, the church rebranded, and so the school, this Christian school is now called Legacy Christian School. At the time, it was called Christian Center Academy, and it's connected to a church called Mile to Church. I will have more on this story coming out this afternoon. The NDP are actually right now are at the church in front of it, holding a press conference, asking the government to suspend its funding to the church until the investigation is done. The Crown, starting in April, had some stuff turned over to them from the Saskatoon police, but the investigation by the police is still ongoing as well. So right now there's 18 victims, but there is most likely probably more. And actually, now that the story is out there, who knows how many more people will come forward as well, because it took a couple brave individuals to come forward first before anybody else would. And what went on at that school, they say it doesn't go on there now. The administration that was there at the time, the principal, the school director, have all moved to different Christian schools, ironically, all still in Saskatchewan. We don't know where, because they don't actually say who the principal or school director was, and there was several over that time period. So we don't actually know the individuals who were in charge at the time of these different, I'll call them abuses. And there was all kinds of things, like there was solitary confinement they used, and stuff that we only use on the worst criminals in jail, not because you spoke out in class and you shouldn't have. So it's definitely an interesting story to take a look at, and I'm sure that there'll be more than just what comes out today about it. And I'm sure that there'll be more, charges publicly, or other students speaking out about what happened to them during that time period, because it's a significant period of time. We're not talking like one school year here. We're talking, about 2 decades.
And it's tragic on a number of levels. I mean, not just the abuse of those students, but also, when I would like to see more of a move, though, towards independent schools and people having more school choice and being able to set up, whether it's faith-based or whether it's secular, or whatever schools they like. And when you see examples like this, where an unfortunate fringe, seems to, I imagine, as somebody says, "Oh, here comes the Christian bashing." Well, no, this is bashing of the fringe of the Christians. Every religion has their fringe. And, most Christians are not going to paddle people and demand them to pray the gay away. No. But when you see examples like this, of course, it makes it a lot harder. As you said, the NDP is taking advantage of this. They always want standardized schooling and heavily government-controlled schooling. And it really sets things back for everybody on every level. It's really too bad to see this happen.
Yeah, and here in Saskatchewan, the student money follows you wherever you're going. So, like, if you want to put your kid, for example, like here in Regina, if you want to put your kid into the Regina Christian School here in town, that's actually, we're very near the legislature, your funding goes to that school. Now, the school then can charge tuition over and above the funding amount as well, but your funding follows you. There's actually only one private school that doesn't receive funding in the entire province. Most of these other religious-based schools receive funding. And it's ironic because you mentioned about Christian bashing. CBC has been on a tear of that lately, almost daily, trying to get Christian schools defunded because they didn't have Pride Month, for example. But neither did most of the Catholic schools, but they're not calling for the Catholic schools to be defunded. They just want the independent Christian schools defunded because they won't celebrate Pride Month when it goes against the belief of the school. And what we're seeing now, I opened it and I actually wasn't even sure the story was true. So I did a little checking to make sure, because this is like, the CBC has been on a tear in the last 6 weeks, going after non-government schools and institutions in particular. It's almost every single day they have a story coming out here in Saskatchewan. It's like their editor doesn't know that there could be possibly another story out there. It's unfortunate because they are attacking people that do good work and teach kids what they need to know: math, reading, writing, things that they actually need to use in real life as they go on after the public school system and then head into college, university, apprenticeship, whatever they do after school. And there's been a real push to try and eliminate these independent schools in the province. And it would drastically change the education system because there is a lot of independent schools, Christian and otherwise. There's a lot of independent schools. I mean, we have an independent school here in town called Luther College High School that you can send your kid to as well. But it's an independent school right here in town, and it's of no religious persuasion. It just has nicer facilities because you pay extra money. And so there's a real push to try and defund that. Talking with the NDP, they obviously would like to see just one universal system of just Catholic and public and eliminate all the other schools. But once again, parents should have a choice on how they want their kids educated, particularly if you follow some stories done over the last few months, including one in my own daughter's school that you can go back and read on a transgender person that came in and talked to 10 to 12-year-olds about switching their gender. So, as a parent, we should be asked about these things. And so my daughter coming home and asking me questions about what is transgenderism and why do I have to pick a pronoun? And even when I explained the situation with Leah Thomas, the swimmer, she's like, well, that's not fair. It's just a man in a female bathing suit. And I said, well, yeah, sort of, maybe, we're not sure. But that was her first thing when she heard about the Leah Thomas thing, because she asked me about it, because she knew that I had done some stuff on that in the past on athletes in different uses.
It was a child. The emperor wore no clothes. So,
yes,
they
exactly.
don't hold back. Well,
and interestingly enough, actually, just speaking on the pronouns for a second, Demi Lovato has changed her pronouns back today to she and her from they and them.
Oh,
which she was one of the first ones that came out to change her pronouns, a really famous person, and everybody else followed her. Well, she just came out today and she's like, no, I feel female now, so I go by she and her. So who knows? Maybe we're seeing a tide changing here where maybe there is some sanity coming back.
Yeah, whatever floats her boat, I guess. But
yeah. Well, she's an adult. If she's an adult, she can do whatever she wants. I don't care.
Yeah.
It's only when I think parents should be concerned when things are being done to their children without their permission. That's where I take issue. If you're an adult and you want to get surgery to change your gender, go ahead. It's only when you're, going after, 5-year-olds to change their gender that I start to have an issue with that. And I think most parents do. And given how many reach out to me, a lot do. So, and I also have a follow-up story coming out as well about a BC guy who's wanted for assault with a weapon. And basically the Saskatchewan RCMP said they would pick him up and send him back to BC, but BC basically doesn't want to pay to send him back, so they're not picking him up. So he's living here in Saskatchewan with freedom because the BC government will not pay to transfer someone for assault with a weapon back to BC to stand trial. But, Tamara gets picked up and they have no problem sending her across.
I was about to say, if you photoshopped a picture of this guy with a bouncy castle in front of the Saskatchewan legislature, they'd probably hustle him back there in an hour.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No problem. He'd be gone. He'd be on a private plane.
All right. Well,
thanks,
lots
Cory.
to cover, and looking forward to seeing more coming out, and along with your columns and the news copy. So good to talk to you again today, Chris, and we'll talk to you again, I'm sure, soon.
Thanks, Cory. Have a great day.
Great, thanks. So that was the Western Standard's Christopher Oldcorn, and yes, he covers a broad number of things. He puts his opinion content out there, usually 1 or 2 columns a week, and lots of news items. He's our man in Saskatchewan, watching things, and I'm still allowed to call him the man in Saskatchewan for now. If he wants to change his gender identity, I will respect that when the time comes, because Chris is an adult, but I've seen no indication that he wants to be referred to anything else at this time. So, okay, let's, and there's, you see Nico scrolling all those stories from Chris, all that stuff out there with our eastern neighbor, Saskatchewan and Alberta have so much in common too. We are close friends, and it's news that impacts all of us in watching these trends. Let me speak to our sponsor, another one. Getting back into the realm of having 2 sponsors, I get used to that, and it's great. We got the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. People might be familiar with Tony Bernardo. He's been running that organization for a long time. He's been a fantastic advocate for people who want to own, transfer, use firearms legally, responsibly, of course. And if you own a firearm, if you want to own a firearm, you hunt, you target shoot, any of those things, you got to have a membership with these guys. This is how you protect your rights. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I don't like giving the left credit for much of anything. One thing I'll give them credit for is safety in numbers. You have to lobby together. And this is what it sounds like. It's a Canadian Shooting Sports Association. So it's an association of other firearm owners. You take out a membership, you join, you're working as a group to stand up for yourself, because you got a government that wants to take away your property. They want to take away your right and ability to use that property. And if you don't push back, they will win. So get on there, guys. Canadian Shooting Sports Association. Their URL is CSSA-CILA. Take out a membership with these guys, and it's only there to help yourself, and it's well worth it. All right, let's see some of the comment scrolls. Sponsors, any other drink of water. So let's see. Jet ordered Resistance coffee there. He said, it better be good, Cory, or my squirrels are coming for you. Honestly, Jet, I'm not worried about that one. I don't make false claims around here. If you order that Resistance coffee, it's good stuff. I ordered a whole whack of it in the past. They sponsored us before, and I got a whole bunch of different flavors from the packs. And fresh ground, you can't beat it. It's very good. And Regina here is working in the office. She's been making it up. They sent us a bunch of it here, and we've been drinking it here. So I don't have to sit here and gag it down and pretend to be enjoying the coffee as I have it. It's actually good stuff. No amount of sponsorship would make me drink bad coffee. Coffee's too important to me. All right, let's speak on some news items before we move along here. So what do we got? This one's kind of interesting on the international front. Excuse me. Nancy Pelosi, the Crypt Keeper. But she's flown into Taiwan. This is the highest ranking American official to go to Taiwan in 25 years. And for people watching the international scene, it's a very provocative move against China. I mean, China loses it when it comes to any symbolism, particularly that may recognize Taiwan as a country. China refuses to accept that Taiwan is a country. And, there's been a lot of aggressive, military maneuvers and things moving along. There's been a lot of threat that China's going to invade Taiwan and take it. And basically, like Jordan Cron that said there, I don't like Pelosi, but wow, she has balls. Yeah, that's one of the areas, the few areas, well, I'll give her a thumbs up. Because, if you think Russia's a problem in the world, China is back there in the background, and we are dependent on them. Kind of what I was talking with Chris about. Oh, or was it Chris? Yeah, I think it was Chris, or maybe it was with Kelly. It's been a long show already. When I'm talking about consumer products and the prices going up, a lot of the prices are going down on a lot of the electronics and the crappy things and stuff like that. Well, if you look at the label on the vast majority of it, everything probably from my pen to the mouse I use, it all came from China. We are so dependent on those guys, so dependent. And if it comes to a real conflict with them, we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. So I'm not saying we should be going out and stirring a conflict necessarily, with anything more than we have to, but we should stop bending over for them too. I mean, Trudeau pandered to China for years, long enough, didn't it? And Canadian citizens basically held hostage over there for a long time, and they don't admit it, but basically it turned out to be a prisoner swap to get them back. They are not a nice nation. They're and people need to be pushing back. So if Pelosi is going to recognize Taiwan and get over there, I say good honor. There's not many things I say good honor about, but that's one of them that I think is a good development. Now let's look into bad developments, and let's see. That's the Drug-Free Prison Act. This is an interesting one. So this was Parliament passed this Prisons Act. This is again gets to how governments think if we could just pass a law, we can change things. Well, if that would work, illegalizing murder would have stopped murder, wouldn't it? We do. I'm not saying we should legalize murder, but I'm just saying a law alone doesn't stop something. So they passed the Drug-Free Prisons Act. I imagine with the intent of getting drug-free prisons, but it didn't work. It's going up and up and up. But that reflects everywhere else in the country, or most of the developed world these days. We have an opioid epidemic. People are getting addicted at higher and higher levels. And hey, a lot of that's that fentanyl. That's powerful crap, and it's relatively cheap. And speaking again of rogue nations, a lot of that's coming into North America from China, and it's eating our people alive. It is very nasty. So I guess a survey of 34,000 men sentenced to federal penitentiaries showed that the number of lifetime addicts had increased. Inmates reporting lifetime drug use, and this is sad and unfortunate, but shows some of the social demographics we got to look at when we address things. 91% of Indigenous prisoners reported lifetime drug use, like a whole life of it. 79% of the white people, and 51% of the black people. Now we go too far into identity politics sometimes, but sometimes we should look at the cultural things or what's going on then and see who's not getting sucked up in it and find out why. So, I mean, as far as that goes with prisoners, okay, we got 90% of the First Nations prisoners and 80% of the white ones and only 50% of the black ones. We should be looking, well, why are the black ones being smarter about this and not getting caught up in it? Let's learn from this. So, I mean, let's look into some of this stuff and find out. But as it stands anyways, the numbers are going up and up and up. And, just because the government doesn't want drug use to go up in the prisons doesn't mean it will drop. Ineffective legislation, they seem to specialize in it. Let's study things. Let's make nuanced approaches to policy rather than just making more and more laws that don't get us anywhere. But again, like I said, this government can't even get their own payroll right. So Cheryl Dawn saying, why were the two Michaels never interviewed in the media? I don't know. I honestly don't. They kept a very, very low profile upon getting back. It could be a choice of their own. They might not be interested. I don't know. But, they would certainly be welcome on here if they ever wanted to come on, but they haven't shown themselves to be responsive. Here's a story from the Brian Passafume. And, this was put out the other day, but it's great. And it shows that hypocrisy of the federal government and Trudeau. And this is where there was only 11 days where Trudeau wasn't traveling on his private jet in July. So 2/3 of the day, he actually flew on his private jet. 20 trips, and they were all for photo ops and things like that. Nothing important. He logged 26,000 kilometers of travel. This is the guy telling us to tighten our belts. There was a good Tristan Hopper piece. I don't have that one on hand, but he wrote a great headline on that too, basically saying that Trudeau's jet use, I think, in that month alone was more than the entire Truckers' Freedom Convoy burned to get to Ottawa for their protest. Kind of puts things into perspective, doesn't it? That hypocritical bad hair hammerhead who is our prime minister, unfortunately, still to this day. He can fly around and burn tens of thousands of liters of fuel for his vanity trips. And meanwhile, the rest of us are supposed to tighten our belt because we're saving the world from climate change. Yeah, right. Let's see in the comments there. Jet seeing lots of angry Canuck expats in Costa Rica. Yeah, they got him down there. Wild Rose asking if Notley ever responded to an invitation. No, the NDP are not terribly responsive to us when we ask them for much of anything. But again, as leader of the opposition, she'd always be welcome on here if she wanted to be. I don't think we'd agree on much, but she's welcome on the show. Let's see. Campus, we're seeing this trend going on more and more. Campus vax mandates are okay. So labor arbitrators, things like that, keep finding that mandates for vaccination. I got a lot of problems with this. If they want to have that as a policy, fine, but we need to deregulate and open up our post-secondary, then allow a lot more options. Allow it so that there are ones. Fine, when you start losing some of your brighter PhD candidates, things like that, to other universities and colleges that aren't imposing vaccine mandates upon the students, maybe that'll help them move along. But I mean, it's just so absurd and ridiculous. Look, the vaccines don't stop the spread. They don't. This isn't theory anymore. I mean, I'm not going to go into whether they provide benefit in general or things like that. But the main part, the main justification, the main reason to have mandates theoretically was that you're protecting people from each other. Well, it makes no damn difference. So drop them. Just drop them. You're screwing with kids' lives. This is education. It's not like they get extra years later that they can tack on. The sooner we can get them through and graduating, we're all better for it. The federal convoy inquiry is coming up this fall, and the budget now has come in, I guess. It's going to cost $19 million. There's 18 lawyers on staff at the Public Order Emergency Commission. So yeah, $19 million to look back and see whether the government was right or wrong in imposing the Emergencies Act. It's going to be interesting, though. I hope, and we do see that now. And we saw that with the judge who basically spanked that justice of the peace there, Goodman. His name was Goodman, with Tamara Leach, and let her out. And so that's enough. Basically implied she's been a political prisoner. I gave her bail and said, let's get on with trial and proper justice. Not every judge is liberal tainted. Not every one of them. And the justice who's going to be running that inquiry starting this fall, they start on Labor Day. I'd like to think maybe he's going to be a principled one, and he's going to follow up. And we are going to see, because I want it fully exposed, that we had a federal government that imposed martial law upon citizens over a bouncy castle protest. Because every other little thing we've seen from cabinet, we've shown that the government has no case. Minister Mendocino, the king of lies, lied constantly saying the police wanted that intervention. They didn't. We saw media lying and misreporting, guys like Justin Ling saying that guns were seized by convoyers, and then government officials were using that line. That's not true at all. It was a lie. We saw, the Russian funding thing from the state broadcaster, the CBC, and the federal government used that as their excuse. That was bullshit. So if this inquiry actually starts to get to the root of things, I got a feeling we're going to see some very interesting and good outcomes from it. Maybe it'll finally, so enough people realize just how far this federal government overstepped and what they did to us. Cheryl Dawn saying, why not vacation in Canada? Our tourism industry is suffering. She's talking about Trudeau. And yeah, I agree. I mean, probably Harrington Estate. That's the lake cottage, they call it. It's a mansion north of Ottawa. It's exclusively for the Prime Minister and his family. It's a multiple amount of acres. They've put something like, I think it was 8 million or 11 million in renovations into that just since Trudeau became Prime Minister. He can go there anytime he likes with private acres, full security, lakeside, beautiful weather this time of year, and vacation with his family. But he doesn't want to. He'd rather take a private jet and fly to Costa Rica, where we got to house the pilot and everybody else down there while he's sitting on it, in case they have to fly him back for an emergency. Pamela saying, well, who wants Trudeau in Canada? Yeah, there is that. But the hypocrisy is brutal. It really is. Especially, again, when it costs $60,000 just to fly him one way. If only it was only one way. But yeah, again, I don't expect him to be going around staying in campgrounds or in public areas. He is a head of a country and does need some security, whether we like him or not. But the hypocrisy is just galling, and it's worth reporting on over and over to remind people. As Dave mentioned earlier, here's another beauty. The CBC hiked another pay hikes, another $12 million in raises. We're all suffering. We're tightening our belts. The CBC is begging and groveling and sniveling, giving a blumpkin to the federal government in hopes of getting more funding all the time because they're such an important service and it's such an emergency. and then they just give it out to perks to each other and raises for everyone else. Why on earth do we have a state broadcaster? I mean, that's one of the things it's seeing is more and more open calling to fully defund that rotten institution. If nothing else, I want to see with a Conservative victory and a follow-up is getting rid of the CBC. It's just a garbage organization that's long outserved its need or purpose. And liquidate it. Then we can buy a cheap teleprompter for me from those guys, what's left of it. Let's see. Nurses Association in Ontario is worried that they've got too heavy workloads. Well, yeah, the healthcare system's collapsing everywhere. It's a broken system. But I still am not seeing many politicians with the balls to say, let's change the system. Let's break it up. The Canadian Health Act is broken. It's wrong. It's unsustainable. No, the only politically correct answer is give more money to it, give more money. We have been giving more money to it. Notley's there. It's underfunded. Notley, we've massively increased the amount of funding that's gone to the health system. It's still not working. It's the system. It's packed with union maggots who are doing bugger all, administration and bureaucrats that are choking the whole thing up, and a complete lack of competition through a government-enforced monopoly system on provision. And it's not working. Money won't fix it. We need to change the system. Let's see. Where was I there? Oh, yeah, there's a bunch of these clowns out in BC. I'm waiting for the new story that's going to be coming out pretty soon. There was one in Ontario, too. It's starting to spread. They call themselves the tire extinguishers. Oh, these are very tough environmental warriors. These guys, they go out in the night and they deflate the tires on SUVs. I guess they did 34 of them in BC the other day out by Victoria and that. The reason they're going to hit the news soon is because somebody's going to come out one night and find these idiots hovering around their vehicle and deflating the tires, and they are going to take out justice on them themselves. It's going to happen. Not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, and these idiots, unfortunately, are going to get a terrible reckoning. You won't see them doing it in rural areas, I'm sure. I wouldn't suggest they come out to the Prentice region and start doing that. It's terribly dangerous to mess with people's property in a rural setting in the middle of the night. Oh, well, they're saving us from ourselves, right? Okay, that's enough out of me for today. Tomorrow, we've got a couple of good guests coming in. Lindsay Wilson of Alberta Proud. Been on a number of times, and of course, that keeps covering a lot of things. I mean, they're proud of being Albertan, and they cover a lot of government issues. And Catherine Christensen, she's a lawyer, and these guys have been working on a class action lawsuit on behalf of Canadian Armed Forces personnel who basically got hooped on the vaccine mandates, and they're pushing back, and they are seeking compensation. So they're going to be very good conversations. As well, of course, I'll be covering news, and I'll have a whole fresh new rant for you. So thanks for tuning in today, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow at 11:30 a.m.